special effects factories in Los Angeles, where we're going to find out the secrets of Tim Considine, one of Hollywood's leading special effects people, and his staff. And luckily today I'm here with Horrifica, a.k.a. Josie of Pissant. What are you wearing there, Josie?
Troma, woo!
And what's the first stop on our...
We're going to go find Chris. That's what we're going to do.
Oh, Chris.
Let's go.
I think he used to volunteer for Troma, if I'm not mistaken.
So. Oh. Wait, there he is.
You see him? Oh, my heavens, what happened?
This is Chris.
Oh, I thought...
Hey, sorry, I was hard at work.
Chris, tell us a bit about what do you do in the world of special effects, Chris?
Primarily, I'm a designer, conceptual designer, illustrator, and a painter of the finished products. When everything's made, I paint it. So primarily with the designs that I do, everything starts on pencil and paper, and from there usually it goes into the computer where I augment it through coloring it or painting it or just cleaning it up. So usually it all begins with a writer, and he has a great idea and he puts it on paper, and then they come to us and they usually have a vague description of what they're looking for, and I begin to do sketches. I drew this one while I was driving on the 405 freeway. I was inspired by a piece of construction equipment I saw. So once I started with that, I had a really loose sketch. I scanned it in the computer and enlarged it and printed it back out. And from that, I drew over that loose sketch and tightened it up to a line drawing. And from there, I scanned it in the computer again, and I began to paint it and try to give it volume and a personality. And once the design is approved and we figure out how the best way to go about building the actual thing, it is handed off to the sculptors who begin sculpting it in clay. And from there it goes to the mold makers, and before long you have a giant monster. The whole entire process, that just depends yet again on time and money. And we can sometimes have a day, a week, or in some of those big shops they have months to do one thing.
So the more money, the less time?
No, the more money, the more time.
Oh, okay.
It's funny how that works.
How much will this cost?
Well, I'm not really the money person, but depending on how complicated it has to be, if it has to move and stuff, it could cost tens of thousands of dollars, if not more.
Well, now we're going to go see the man, Tim Considine, and if we're lucky, we're going to see Jim too.
Wow, and maybe even Tim Considine.
Oh.
Wow, Tim Considine. You know, that thing on the table, that looks a little bit like, is that Christina Aguilera?
It is. It was for this makeup campaign that we did called Declare Yourself, to encourage people to register and vote. And she was a sweetheart to work with.
It looks like you sewed her mouth shut.
Yes.
Is it possible to do that to my mother-in-law?
It actually wasn't that complicated to do. Really, there were just eyelets that we glued onto her face, and then glued the ribbon on as well, and glycerin for tears, because a lot of times some people can cry on cue, but a lot of people cannot.
Young people always asking, how do I break into the world of special effects?
Well, breaking in is tough, and I must say there's two places you can be. You can be in LA, or you can be in New York, and even in New York, the jobs are few and far between. So if it's really your die-hard desire to be in special effects, you need to relocate to Los Angeles, because it is the capital of filmmaking. And LA is really the place. It's a real business here.
Who inspired you?
I was inspired by Dick Smith, who was sort of the godfather of special effects makeup. Dick Smith did The Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman back in the day, and he did The Exorcist, which was really the first film that ever had special effects makeup in it, where you saw something happen before your eyes, like when her neck swelled out. You saw that happen live on screen, and that was the first film that did it. And he was such a great artist and such a helpful person. You could call Dick up on the phone, and as long as you had educated questions, he would answer them for you. So that's what I did. I was 17 years old. I called him up on the phone. I said, what do I do to get into this business? And he tried to tell me, don't. He did everything he could to convince me, do not get into this business. It's thankless, you won't make any money, you'll be breathing chemicals all day long, it'll make you unhealthy. But I saw through his little ploy. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. And I just didn't take no for an answer. Breaking in, you have to have experimented a lot on your own. You have to really love it. You have to love doing it 12 hours a day. You can't look at it as a job that you're going to make money from. You have to really, really love the art, love the craft, love making monsters or making realistic old age makeups or character makeups or, you know, likenesses or dummy heads. You have to love it. Because in the beginning it's going to be thankless, and actually most of the time it's going to be very thankless. If you want to be a makeup artist, you can go to makeup school, but you also have to have some talent for makeup already, because they're going to teach you the very basics, and they're not going to teach you about how to get a job. Unfortunately, in most of the makeup schools, the students that graduate that are the best students become the teachers. I got started in high school because I had a friend who was really into horror movies. I grew up in the time with Friday the 13th and Halloween and those type of movies. And my friend wanted to make his own movies. At that time it was Super 8. We didn't have video back then. So we made our own little Super 8 horror movies. And I was the guy that went to the library and got books. Books are very helpful. That's how I learned. I learned from this book, Richard Corson's Stage Makeup. That's originally how I learned makeup. Tom Savini has several books out. You can learn some beginning things there. You know, if you go on the internet, there are books out there to learn the basics and do it yourself. Teach yourself and then get an internship at a real shop.
By the way, what is that? You hear that noise? What is that?
That's a compressor. One of the other artists is airbrushing right now.
What is airbrushing?
Airbrushing is when, instead of using a brush to paint, you use an airbrush, a small tool that, with compressed air, you blow the paint onto the foam rubber mask or whatever you're doing, and you have a lot more control.
And what was that big noise, that the boom, 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 that big noise?
That's the compressor that comes on, and you need a compressor to create compressed air to airbrush. Sometimes you have a small one because this is a big shop. We have a very large one, so it makes a lot of noise. But compressor is an important thing to have, and you can expect to spend at least $100 for a compressor if you want to airbrush. And if you have a shop where you need a compressed air for other things like drilling and cutting and other things like that, you need to have a big compressor, and then you're talking $500 maybe. But it's a piece of equipment that'll last you for years and years. And we did do airbrushing on a lot of the makeups. I mean, certainly all the Toxic Avenger makeups were airbrushed beforehand. And then when I applied it, because it was in two pieces, it was a back piece and a front piece, there would be an area that blended together, and you'd have to airbrush that and match the front back to the back half so you wouldn't see the seam. It's all about hiding the seams. You have a rubber piece that goes on, and it looks beautiful, but there's a place where the rubber ends and real skin begins, and that's the big key, is trying to blend the two together. Make the rubber look like real skin and make the real skin look more like the rubber.
Just like blending makeup. What if you don't have all that money to get a compressor?
You don't have to have that. There's a lot that can be done with sponges, because life is different than doing beauty makeup too. Life is very splotchy. We all have splotches in our skin. My skin is very irregular. Your skin is very irregular. There's reds, there's yellows, there's browns. And if you can duplicate that, that's how you create life. Like I've done here with this bruise. It's not just a red color smeared all over the place. That would look phony. But because it's little splotches of red, and some of it's deeper and some of it's more blended, it's more realistic. And you can do a lot of that with a simple sponge. This is called a red rubber sponge. But it's an incredibly important tool because it has all these little dots on it. When I use this, I get little splotches of color, and I can drag it to get blended things. And if I need a brush, I can blend it even more. But splotchy is definitely what it's all about. There's a lot you can do with simple materials that you could find in your neighborhood, even if you're not in a big city. Everybody has, especially around Halloween time, everybody has like a magic shop or a costume shop that'll have these materials. And a lot of times when I'm doing things, there are a few things. There's what we call thick blood, which is basically blood, but it's very, very thick. I don't know if you can see the consistency of this, but it's like a paste. It's even thicker than jelly. This is what I've used here to make these little scratches. And it looks like a scratch, yet it's just this jelly that I put on. And I could do a big wound with this. I could put a big pile of this and make this giant wound on her head. The blood itself, I recommend you making yourself. because all you need is corn syrup and food coloring. Cairo brand corn syrup, because it's clear corn syrup.
Light corn syrup.
Light corn syrup, not dark. Red food coloring, yellow food coloring, and a drop of green to darken it a little. And what I learned early on from Dick Smith and everybody, you mix your blood, you take a needle, you prick your finger. If your blood matches the real blood, then it's okay. If it doesn't match, it's not okay. And okay, that's a little painful maybe to prick your finger, but you'll know it's right. I mean, what I was doing here, it's all very simple materials. I used what they call a bruise wheel, and it has the 4 colors that you need for bruises. There's a maroon red, there's a deep purple, there's a lighter purple, and there's a green for the different stages of bruising. And for this one $10 product maybe, I can get all the colors I need out for bruises. I've used mostly the maroon here, and I put it on sometimes with dots and sometimes with blending, depending on the effect. If you wanted a scratch, you could do it like that. And then the thick blood that I showed before, if I've done the scratch, now I take some of the thick blood with this type of sponge. They call it Scott foam or stipple sponge, but I can dip this into the blood and then go over that like that, and it looks like a cut. Also, because a cut is not always the same everywhere. Like this is just a big blob of jelly, but if I spread it out a little bit, it's more realistic. It's uneven, like life is uneven. This is the foam latex injection gun.
Oh my heavens.
Yes, it's
Sexy.
kind of like a giant syringe, and this goes into the mold though. This doesn't go where you think it goes. And this is how you inject the rubber into the mold.
And what's this you have here?
And this is a ventilation mask to guard you from the harmful chemicals that we use for making special effects materials. There's a lot of deadly materials that we work with sometimes, and certain things you definitely want to have a mask with.
What are the basics that you need, would you say, when you're trying to make your own damn special effects?
Well,
must you have an oven, or?
Well, if you're going to do foam rubber, if you're going to do, say, like a Toxic Avenger appliance or, you know, something drastic, yes, you do need to have certain things you need to have. You need to have a mix master. It's a Sunbeam mix master, which is, you know, like your mom makes cakes in, the thing with the beaters and it spins around. You need to have that to make foam rubber, and you need to have an oven. You're not allowed to use your home oven because chemicals, like we were saying before, a lot of toxic chemicals in this business, and people you're working for won't protect your health. You have to protect your own health. So you can't bake that foam in your home oven where your mom makes dinner. You have to have a separate oven for that. There are other materials you can use. Some people now are doing appliances out of gelatin, which you can use ordinary Knox gelatin and a few other ingredients and make an appliance that will work nicely, and you don't need an oven. You need a microwave is all you need. You need a microwave and a bucket. That's pretty much it.
What do you think is the biggest problem with your profession?
Biggest problem with our profession? I don't know. One answer I can come up with is computers.
Yeah.
They have killed us.
In what way?
Well, puppets are not needed anymore. A lot of the work can be done with computers now, and that has cut into our work a lot. Of course, I'm not anti-computer completely. Sometimes it's a unique blend between the two can make it perfect effect, but it's not like it was back in the 80s and 90s. We're not making gremlins every day and puppets. And
It's taken at least 50% of the business. So
you
that's
have to adapt.
All right. Oh my. And what is, oh. So what are you doing there, gentlemen?
I believe right now we're going to do a nuclear meltdown, which was determined by makeup effects scholars to be first used in Class of Nukem High. This effect is achieved by bromoseltzer and water and food coloring.
The reason we used green was because the MPAA, anytime we used blood in the old days, the MPAA rating board would give us would make us cut it out of the movie because blood was not permitted in an R-rated movie, at least if it was a Troma movie. They permitted in Bruce Willis, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, but not with us. So that's why we had the historic first meltdown in Class of Nukem High was green. Well, shall we demonstrate?
First, the bromo goes into the mouth dry.
Yummy.
And now, the green liquid. And now the...
Chin up.
There
Ah.
you go. Let's do that more, yes. I think we needed a little more bromo because the foaming seemed a little short.
Oh, do I have to do it again?
And when you really feel it getting crazy, then start. There you go. Slowly let it out. Slowly let it out.
Big eyes, big eyes. Oh, like a zombie. Oh,
That's right. Now you see, we're going to try and use a baby wipe to wipe this off, but it's not going to take off the green.
Yeah, it is food
So when
coloring.
you run into this problem on set, I mean, of course, a shower will do it, but sometimes you're on set and you've done this green scene, but now you need to go backwards in the script and do an earlier scene. Well, there's a material we have, hopefully I have it with me, called cuticle removal.
Ah,
Which is something you can...
Wait, let me get the...
It's used for removing cuticles. That's not what I use it for, but I believe it has a little bit of bleach in it. And this will, indeed, take away the stain.
Ah.
And so it's, you know, when you're in a rush on set and you don't have time to go shower and shampoo and all that crud and you have to go right to the next shot, this is for blood as well.
I think it...
Thank you very much, Tim Considine.
Always my pleasure.
Tromeo and Juliet, Terra Firma, Toxic Avenger Part 2, 3, Jim O'Hala, 4, and now...
Hey, and Tales from the Crapper, too.
Tales from the Crapper, right, of course. Save the day with Tales from the Crapper.